Hello, and welcome to Leveraging Thought Leadership. I'm your host, Bill Sherman, and today we talk about one of my passions, organizational thought leadership. That is, the people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on behalf of their organizations. My guest today is Scott Ambler. Scott is the VP and Chief Scientist of Disciplined Agile at the Project Management Institute. He's the co-creator of the Disciplined Agile Toolkit. He's written books on the topic, speaks internationally, and writes frequently. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me here.
So let's start simply. What is your role with Project Management Institute? What does it mean to be the chief scientist of Disciplined Agile?
That's a good question. I wish I had an answer, but no, I'm joking. Basically my role is pretty much exactly as you were saying. It's to help define and curate and collect all these great ideas that I have and my colleagues have and the people that we are working with have around how to work in a disciplined agile manner and what it means, and then to share it with others. So I'm a collector of information, somebody who massages it and then puts it out again and shares it as widely as possible.
So is that function more of a research function, an evangelist, a mentor function? What is your day like?
Yeah, all of the above. So it's I certainly do a lot of mentoring and curating and sharing of information and getting it out there. The Some of it is research. I try to read as widely as I can, but some of it's also doing. I'm out there in social media, talking with others, helping them. I get to go to events and conferences and into organizations and to share ideas and bounce ideas around, strategy sessions. So I have just a wide range of information sources and then opportunities to also share. I'm lucky enough to be in a couple of working groups or advisory boards, I guess you would say, and frankly, they're awesome because it's just like smart people getting together, sharing ideas. One of the places I learned the most is on the advisory boards where we're all just trying to advise these organizations doing whatever it is that they're doing. So just a fantastic opportunity.
So Discipline Agile is something that you've worked on for quite a while, if I understand correctly, right?
Yes.
Talk to me about the process where I believe it's 12, 15 years ago, you started with this idea of Discipline Agile. Tell me a little bit of that story of how the idea came to be what it is today.
Yeah, so what had happened at the time, I was the chief methodologist for IT at IBM Rational. IBM Rational was one of the divisions of IBM at the time. And myself and some of my colleagues, including business partners, of one of whom was Mark Lyons, who ended up being the co-creator of the DA Toolkit with me and is also at PMI right now. As a group, we were working with organizations, helping them to understand and apply agile and lean concepts in their own environments. And we were observing. We were observing what they were doing, what was working well, what was not working well. And some of the observations that we made were along the lines that they put a lot of effort into figuring this stuff out. Nobody had really gotten it right. They're all still working on it. Basically, some were doing reasonably well, some were in serious trouble, but everybody's doing it differently. And many of them couldn't even tell you what they were doing. They'd say they were doing Scrum, and yet they were doing far more than just Scrum, if they were doing Scrum at all. And so we started observing this, and we came to the conclusion that two very serious conclusions. One, that everybody was doing everything differently, but two, they really needed some guidance to help them do it. And that sounds contradictory because when everybody works different, everybody's unique and everybody works differently, and yet they need help to figure this out. Clearly, the usual approach to methodologies and frameworks was not going to get the job done. So we started working on something that eventually became called Disciplined Agile Delivery, which then evolved into what's now called the Disciplined Agile Toolkit as our scope expanded. But we're all about, instead of telling you what to do, we help you to understand what you need to be thinking about and what your options are and how to choose from those options. That way you can choose your own wow and actually do what you need to have a fit for purpose approach for the situation that you actually face.
So, Scott, you've talked about Agile in a way that makes me think of Disciplined Agile as a movement, and that's really where Agile itself started. So, we're talking about Disciplined Agile as a movement within a movement. And I find it really interesting because you're talking about not telling people what to do, but the questions to be asked. You mentioned the concept of wow. Can you explain that concept and how that fits within the Disciplined Agile Toolkit?
Yeah, definitely. So WOW is an abbreviation of way of working. So our entire message is to choose your way of working, and this is basically a new way of saying to own your process. So 20 years ago, and I believe it was coming mostly from the extreme programming community, but certainly from Agile in general, was this idea that teams should own their own process, that they should choose the way that they work, that they should self-organize, and they should learn and evolve their approach as they go. So but that was sort of lost in the as the frameworks became popular and these various methods became popular, and people started making money from certifying people in them. We got to this point where we were getting reasonably prescriptive, and we had a lot of rhetoric around the fact that we weren't prescriptive, but we really were, and at Agile community in general. And the challenge that we had was that we started telling people what to do. These are the best practices of this method, and if you follow these best practices, everything will be fine. And that's great, but those best practices are best in a certain situation, and in other situations are not such good ideas. So in Disciplined Agile, our philosophy is, and our observation is, that every team is unique, facing a unique and changing situation. So therefore, you want to have a fit for purpose, wow, a fit for purpose way of working that evolves over time as you learn, as you get better, and as your situation changes. So that's the basic idea there. So in many ways, we're getting back to where Agile originally came from, some original philosophies that were lost along the way.
So, with that, then, you have created a toolkit that people, if I understand correctly, can pick and choose. Is that and adapt to their way of working? Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is. So what we do is we walk you through, here are the issues, these what we call process goals, and then they break down into process decision points or intentions that you need to fulfill in some way. And then we say, hey, you know what? Here's a collection of potential ways to fulfill those intentions, and then here's the trade-offs of those techniques. So you choose the best strategy that you can, given the situation, given your current skill set, given your culture, given the situation that you face. Because we don't know you, we don't know your situation, but you do. So instead of telling you what the best way of working is, we can instead say, here are a bunch of great options. Do the best that you can, given your understanding of these techniques. So we describe the techniques and we describe the trade-offs, and then help you to choose better, knowing full well that the choices that you make today, you might change your mind, 3 months from now or 6 months from now, as you've gotten better and as you've learned.
So let's turn a little bit towards some of the signals that I see in, for example, your title, right? When I hear a title of chief scientist, I think of structure, I think of rigor and process, disciplined, agile, right?
Yeah.
Scientist and discipline suggest a certain way of working. And at the same time, you're talking about flexibility, way of working. There seems to be a creative tension between the two. And I find that very interesting where you're inviting people to participate. And I go back to something that you said about your role sitting in on boards and groups and listening. Let's talk about the process of your role as chief scientist, for example, as listening.
Yeah, so it really is about observation and listening and seeing and questioning, because I run into these best practices all the time, and none of them are best practices. But when I go into an organization or when I start interacting with somebody, and they start telling me about here's what we're doing and here's what's working, here's what's not working, I listen and I observe intensely, because the issue becomes one of I'm always trying to learn about, when I hear about a new technique or when I see a new way of doing things, I'm asking questions along the lines of, at least to myself, what are the advantages of this? When does this work? When does this not work? What
Mm-hmm.
are the trade-offs here? And how would it fit together with other strategies? So I often, sometimes a little too much, break down a larger technique into its components in order to, look to see how those components are all working together. Because sometimes, again, our larger techniques, for example, earned value management, some people consider that a single technique, and fair enough, in some situations that's fair. But there's actually multiple techniques there that we can pull out and use in situations that make sense, and not in and not in other situations. So I'm really looking for I'm trying to answer how does it all fit together, and when does it work, when does it not work, to what extent would I want to do this. And I want to get beyond the purism that and the prejudice that a lot of people have. You talk to some agilists and you start saying, well, you know what, we've adopted some techniques from the traditional serial world, and suddenly I'm evil for doing that, right? I'm impure, I'm a heretic.
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa, right? You talk to the people that prefer a more traditional way of working, and very clearly this agile stuff is evil and would never work. So, and those extreme ideas are simply not right. All these techniques work in some situations and others, so why not learn about that, and why not celebrate that, and have a wide range of options available to you, and so that way you can choose. So I think that's the and have and but importantly, you have to have the freedom of choice. And I think that's where some organizations will struggle. Some people really don't want their people to have choices. They really want everybody to sort of work in the same manner, and it's not realistic.
If you are enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with your friends. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all major platforms, as well as at leveragingthoughtleadership.com. So I'd like you to think back to that point when you were at IBM and starting to develop what became Disciplined Agile. Did you have in your mind at any point that, hey, I'm going to create a methodology and a movement? What was your goal in that time in vision? What did you think you were solving? And does today surprise you?
Yeah, very good question. So first, my goal was to not create a methodology. When I joined IBM, I'd already done that a few times with Agile modeling and Agile data and Enterprise Unified Process and others, and I'd sort of been there and done that, and was hoping never to do it again. And so I really got dragged, kicking and screaming into this, because I really didn't want to do it again. And the but there was a clear need. It goes back to these observations of there being a clear need for some guidance. So, but because I think I was so reticent to jump on the methodology bandwagon yet again, it took a good 6 months for me to really sort of come around to this idea that this was needed and this needed to be done. But I didn't want to do it the same old way. And I really liked extreme programming in its flexibility, although it was still prescriptive in many ways, but it was flexible and tellable. I sort of like that. So there's a lot of great ideas there, but it really took us a while to come up with this idea of providing choices and making those choices explicit, and the trade-offs explicit. And then suddenly I realized, you know what? Okay, we've got something here. Let's run with this and see what happens. So we ran with it, and it just keeps growing, and a little slower than others, but at the same time, we've always had constant growth. And so in many ways we're sort of playing the long game, I guess, because we find more and more people when they run into DA, and then they spend a bit of time looking at it, they realize, oh wow, this is fantastic. We've needed, I've needed this for so long and didn't realize it. And, we really do get people that get it and stick to it. So I think there's a lot to be said there. And then with PMI behind it, it's just been fantastic. We now have the resources both to invest in the toolkit as well as in marketing it and getting our message out there. So I think there's some really good things ahead for us.
So you mentioned PMI, right? And this is a relatively new transformation of Disciplined Agile being part of the PMI ecosystem. Talk to me a little bit about moving into the PMI world and what you're hoping to achieve or doors that have opened as a result. Let's talk going forward into the future.
Yeah, definitely. So we had always respected PMI and leveraged great ideas from PMI. Our certification program was based on PMI. We always had this belief, along with PMI, that you had to earn your certifications; they had to be meaningful, and that that really sort of set us apart in the Agile community for a long time. The but there's great material in PMI, some great IP that we'd already been leveraging and will definitely be leveraging more. So there was some really good synergies there that we'd already been moving towards. At the same time, PMI was also getting into Agile for several years. We've been working on the ACP certification and program, for example. So they were definitely moving that in that direction already. The new version of the PMBOK guide is, the next version released will be have a lot of Agile in it. The new certification test will be almost half Agile, lean, hybrid type stuff. So it really is being adopted, actively being adopted in PMI. So we're learning from each other. We're working together well, and we're all one organization. And this is a very good thing. So PMI is really helping us to up our game and to really bring DA into more situations. We were a little IT focused back in the day, and which is good. IT
Mm-hmm.
is a very important thing. But at the same time, we had not been focusing on non-IT as much as we should have. So we've really and we knew that. We just never had the time. And now we have new venues opening up to us for that. So I think that's some wonderful stuff. And like I said, just having the backing of a larger organization that has the depth that PMI does has been a fantastic thing. And the people that we're working with, we have an incredibly strong volunteer community, and they're active and they're smart and they provide great input. It can be overwhelming a bit sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's a good form of overwhelming.
So you talked about a couple of things there that I want to call out. You mentioned the additional marketing resources to be able to get the message to reach further around the world. You talked about active volunteers and members of the organization who now have a place where they can band together and really help contribute, and whether as evangelizing locally or sharing some of their experience and expertise. You're creating a community for this. Talk a little bit about the community aspect, if you would.
Yeah, definitely. So you're absolutely right. So we knew for years that we really needed to build more of a community, and we'd done a little bit of that with LinkedIn and other venues, but we really didn't work it as much as we should have. We simply didn't have time. We were out in the field working at organizations, but now with being part of PMI, we have this very active chapter community. So there's, these chapters, the PMI chapters all around the world who are actively helping other people learn and to become more professional and to extend their knowledge and their experiences. So just being able to leverage that alone has been fantastic. We've built a program called the Disciplined Agile Chapter Champions, and what this is a group of people that with one or more in each chapter now whose responsibility is to help educate the rest of their chapter in Disciplined Agile and to work with us to get this information out there and to share it and to to let the chapters know what PMI is doing. So this is a fantastic thing. We also have a very strong social media group. We do a lot of work on Twitter and LinkedIn and great stuff. We have a great data analytics group as well. So we get really good feedback into what's working and what's not working, and what people are listening to, what are they hearing, or at least what do we think they're hearing. So there's a lot of really good stuff going on there, I and it's one of those things where we knew we needed to do things like that. We just didn't have the resources, and now we're working with people who are really really good at this and who really know their stuff. So I'm learning a lot, and and I hope they're learning a bit from me. I'm certainly learning a lot from them, and it's been really fascinating, just the type of intelligence we can get from just out of social media feeds.
So, to call that out, I think one of the things that people often think about as creating a movement is there's this instant critical mass, and once you hit it, things just magically happen. And what you're describing there is there's a lot of work behind the scenes, not only with marketing and social media and community building, nurturing community, listening to that community, which is necessary. The larger the movement gets, the more sort of specialty skills you need to make a movement grow faster and further, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you described that some time ago at IBM, you became sort of the reluctant methodologist, going, not another methodology here, but this is the one that now has, breathed life and really scaled. So if you were to offer advice to yourself 10 to 12 years ago, or to someone who's trying to figure out the steps, like you were in, what experience and what advice would you offer?
Yeah. First of all, you have to love what you're doing, and if you don't love it, people will detect that, and nobody's going to follow you if you're just in it for the money. If you're just doing it to keep yourself entertained. I know a few people who are near retirement that are they're doing working that way, and some because they love it. Don't get me wrong, but you really do need to love what you're doing and have a passion for it, and to infect others with that passion. In hindsight, if I could go back in time, I would probably tell myself, spend more time building the community and spend more time coaching others and to create more thought leaders. And we certainly did that, but I think we needed to do more of it. And I think that would have been a very good thing for us. But and frankly, looking back though, I'm very happy with the path that we took. So I wouldn't want to mess too much with that. But certainly, certainly building a community faster and putting more effort into that was probably the way to go.
Well, and to build on that, I think the tools that are available for community building today and going forward in the future are an entirely different set than you had available to you when you were starting to build this movement. And so paying attention to those tools for community building, the strength of the movement, the strength of the scale of thought leadership is tied to not do you have it just in a book or written down somewhere, but how many people have you influenced? How many organizations have adopted this and say, we like this way of thinking, we're going to bring it in and use it ourselves. And so to reach that scale, you've got to build a community of followers.
I believe so.
Scott, thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate being here.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please join our LinkedIn group, Organizational Thought Leadership. It's a professional community where thought leadership practitioners talk shop about our field. So if you're someone who creates, curates, or deploys thought leadership for your organization, then please join the conversation in the Organizational Thought Leadership LinkedIn